Charles initially blamed a throttle issue for losing the rear end, but later took full responsibility for the mistake, which could have cost him and Ferrari a championship. Max Verstappen naturally took the lead after the incident, which brought out a safety car, and the Dutchman strolled to an easy victory. However, the battle for the remaining podium places was far more enthralling, and it was Lewis Hamilton, followed by George Russell, who would occupy these positions, to make it the first double podium for Mercedes this year, which means that they are now merely 2 podiums off surpassing Valtteri Bottas's tally from 2021. And also that George Russell is now only 1 point behind Carlos Sainz in the Drivers' Championship. But it could have been a wildly different story. Hamilton had a great start to the Grand Prix, moving up to 3rd in the opening lap, with Russell, who had gone backwards at lights out, passing Alonso for 5th on lap 4. Whilst Russell was slowly catching Perez, Carlos Sainz was making his way up the field from the back of the grid, gaining 2 positions on the opening lap, then proceeding to dispatch the majority of the rest of the midfield before making it into the points with 2 slick moves on the Aston Martins, the team having celebrated 100 years of Grand Prix racing this weekend. He also passed Daniel Ricciardo in the McLaren on lap 17, before pitting alongside Russell and Hamilton under the Leclerc safety car. The Leclerc crash left the order Verstappen, Hamilton, Perez, Russell and Alonso, with Sainz up to 8th, but the Spaniard would run into trouble in the pits, as he was handed a 5-second time penalty for an unsafe release into the pass of Alex Albon. Carlos would respond in style though, breezing past Norris, who went wide, then Ricciardo, and then Alonso on lap 22, before overtaking George Russell for 4th at the midpoint of the 53-lap race. Carlos then had his eyes set on Sergio Perez to complete a memorable comeback drive, and after a multi-corner scrap, Sainz came out on top at turn 1. But what came next was truly baffling. During the very intense battle between Checo and Carlos, which required a great deal of skill and concentration, Sainz was asked to pit by his Ferrari strategists. It's as if they're not even watching the race. Then, with only 13 laps to go, he was asked to pit and forced to make up a 28-second deficit, despite setting some of the quickest times on his relatively new tyres, and reiterating that he felt very comfortable. What looked like a certain top 3 finish for Carlos Sainz was thrown away by a Ferrari strategy team in tatters, who lack professionalism and, frankly, the skill to do their job. They are the kings of bottle jobs at the moment. I was talking to a Carlos fan over Instagram at the time, and we were truly speechless. The dreadful decision left Sainz in 7th, and he somehow managed to get back into the top 5 by way of consolation, but this decision just epitomises how bizarrely the Ferrari team are thinking at the moment. After the race, I even saw some memes suggesting that Carlos Sainz should replace the strategy team at Ferrari, and I honestly think he would do a far better job. Anyway, back to the fight for the podium, and on lap 42, George Russell went for a dive bomb move on Checo Perez for 3rd, the Mexican bailing out and staying in front of George to his great frustration. However, another opportunity for glory came on lap 50, after Zhou Guanyu retired on lap 47 with a mechanical failure, bringing out the virtual safety car. George took Checo completely off guard at the end of the VSC and blasted straight past him on the run-up to the start-finish straight. So, yet another sour day for Ferrari, but a jubilant one for the Silver Arrows. Lewis Hamilton fighting through a broken drink system to take second, and George using all of his overtaking skill and cunning to reach the podium. Now, onto the best of the rest, and Alpine will be coming away from their home Grand Prix in very good spirits, as it's clear their upgrades are paying off. Fernando Alonso took 6th place and was in the top 5 for the majority of the race, pitting under the safety car and also nearly staying in 5th thanks to Ferrari's dire decision-making. However, 6th is the best finished for Alonso in France since 2006, but Esteban Ocon's P8 was far more fiercely won. He spun out Yuki Tsunoda on lap 1 at turn 8, the Japanese driver being forced to retire under the Leclerc safety car, and Ocon being given a 5-second time penalty for this offence. He did, though, rectify his position by overtaking Daniel Ricciardo for 8th place on lap 7. He pitted under the safety car and fended off Ricciardo for 8th, his first ever points in France, which increased his lead over Valtteri Bottas in the Drivers' Championship in their battle for 7th. Alpine's combined efforts also meant that they have now surpassed McLaren in the Constructors for 4th, the Papaya team ending up in 7th and 9th, their first consecutive double points finish this season. Lance Stroll snagged the last of the points, bringing his tally up to 4 points on the season, and recovering from the very poor qualifying of 17th, his teammate Vettel just behind. Pierre Gasly had a very frustrating French Grand Prix, once again, going off track while trying to overtake Alex Albon, who ended the day in 13th. And the Frenchman was never really within a sniff of points. So yet another poor French Grand Prix to add to his collection. I'm looking back to 2018, where he took out Esteban Ocon. Alfa Romeo had a dreadful day as well, with Valtteri Bottas stuck well outside of the points, as he was unable to do any overtaking of note. And Zhou Guanyu spun into Mick Schumacher on lap 23, being forced to box for a new rear wing, being given a 5-second time penalty for this incident, and capping things up with an early retirement. Alfa Romeo have now not scored points since Canada, and Haas have been catching up in the meantime. So this could have been a very worrying result had Haas not suffered similarly poor fates. Kevin Magnussen was looking to make up for his grid penalty with some points on Sunday, making up 8 places on the opening lap, but Gunther Steiner made the fateful decision to pit his drivers early, and the race crumbled from there. The Charles Leclerc incident gave the teams the opportune moment to pit without consequence, and Haas paid the price. They should have been propelled into the midfield battle by the end of the first round of stops, but instead they were near the rear of the field. Then Mick Schumacher was punted by Zhou, and K-Mag was squeezed by Nicholas Latifi, both drivers crawling back to the pits to retire. So, now for my driver of the race, and it has to be Carlos Sainz. Carlos did everything right on Sunday, with some incredible moves, putting him in a prime position to break free from George Russell's grip on him in the Drivers' Championship. But instead, thanks to Ferrari's tomfoolery, that stranglehold is ever tighter, and George is now within 1 point of 4th place. The Spaniard really did everything he could today, and it was a great recovery drive. But his day was ruined once again, not by another driver, not by another team, but by his own strategy. Now for my team of the race, and it has to be Mercedes once again. I've said it before and I'll say it again, this is no longer a damage limitation season. Mercedes have proved to be reliable to the greatest degree, with a grand total of 1 retirement, the massive pile-up at the start of the British Grand Prix, and a grand total of 1 non-points scoring finish, Lewis Hamilton at Imola. They have been by far the most consistent team, and I would never have guessed that they would be in this good of a position after 12 races back in late February. Finally, for my struggle of the race, and it's Zhou Guanyu. The Chinese driver qualified poorly in 18th, and that certainly set a precedent for what was to come, as he both drove sloppily, ruining Mick Schumacher's already poor race, as well as retiring with yet another reliability issue. This weekend has been a train wreck for both himself and Alfa Romeo. Thank you for listening to F1 Every Week. Congratulations to Max Verstappen on his 27th victory in Formula 1, and tune in next week for a review of the 2022 Hungarian Grand Prix.